We're going to call the November 12th, 2015 Caroline County Board of Supervisors meeting to order. Board members present, Mr. Floyd Thomas, representing the Mattapanai District, Mr. Jeff Black, representing the Western Caroline District, Mr. Reginald Underwood, representing the Reedy Church District, Mr. Wayne Akers, representing the Madison District, Mr. Jeff Seeley, representing the Bowling Green District, and I'm Calvin Taylor, and I represent the Port Royal District. We will now ask Mr. Seeley if he will lead us in invocation at this time.
Can we all please stand? Heavenly Father, as we gather this evening to do county business, please watch over all those in the county and those that are involved and have helped with the county for so long. Please watch over the men and women in uniform overseas, and please guide everybody to a safe return to their homes and to their loved ones. In your name we pray, amen. I would also like to stand for a moment of silence for Mary Anderson, the school board member who passed away just a few weeks ago. Thank you. Can we all turn for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I understand there was at least one amendment to the agenda. Mr. Colley?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Due to an unforeseen scheduling conflict, Delegate Orrick could not attend tonight, and we would like to put Mr. Whiteman on to give us an update on the school construction projects.
Okay, unless there is an objection, then the agenda will stand amended as requested. That takes us to opening board comments. Mr. Thomas, do you have any at this time?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As a matter of fact, I do have a couple of quick comments. One is I'm sure the board saw the Richmond newscast that said the city of Richmond spent over $1 million on the RCI bike race, at least, and they haven't necessarily gotten their money. So I want to commend the board and the staff of getting the county share of the money up front to make sure we weren't behind the eight ball there. And I wanted to thank Chief Loftus and Kevin Whiteman. I didn't know all of the people, Chief, that you had at the high school polling place, but they all worked together. As I said before, we had construction at the high school. They worked together to put lights up, arranged to have golf carts to bring people from the far ends of the parking lot to the polling place. They did a great job. I really appreciate it. And one last thing, I know it's 2 days late, but I want to say happy birthday to my favorite Marine and the rest of the Marine Corps. So we do appreciate it. That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Black?
Yes, I just have, well, I have several actually. The first, obviously, I want to thank Mr. Seeley for the moment of silence for Dr. Anderson. That was obviously very, very difficult for the Lake Landor community. She meant a lot to the community, and she also meant a lot to the Western Caroline District. And I was very proud to have her as a friend. The second thing is I want to obviously commend John Copeland on taking over. I wish him the best of luck, and I look forward to actually working with him in the future when it comes to Board of Supervisors, School Board Relations. The other thing, if we could, if all of you could, just keep in your prayers. Obviously, in my district, on Ladysmith Road, we had the two boys that were killed in the accident. They went to actually Spotsylvania High School where I teach. And that accident happened right outside Lake Landor, so that was pretty tragic for the Spotsylvania community. So just keep that family and the mother in your prayers. That's really tough news. Pastor Tillebaugh was the pastor at that service up at Spotswood Baptist Church, and he did a phenomenal job. He did an absolutely phenomenal job, and as far as his eulogy for the two boys. So. Finally, a couple more. I want to thank the voters of Western Caroline for their, obviously last week coming up to the polls. So it's nice to see everyone. So I appreciate that. The History Club at Caroline Middle, they had their veteran ceremony yesterday. This is the third year they did it. That memorial garden is absolutely phenomenal. The roses in the garden are absolutely beautiful, and it's an unbelievable ceremony that they do every year. So I do want to thank them for their efforts. It really kind of puts Caroline in an unbelievably positive light. Finally, I've just got a question. I see on the agenda that we have appointments, and I was kind of curious, due to the situation, why appointments would be on the agenda at this point. Can someone answer that question?
I would be glad to answer it. The appointments come due at the time that the old appointment or the old person in that position leaves, or when their time of service is up. And in these cases, these two appointments are due, because the persons now serving in those appointments, their time of service ended, I believe, in November.
Right. And I guess my concern is we've had many appointments over the years that we have deferred for months and months at a time. And I just feel in light of circumstances with new board members coming in, it would only be fair to them to allow them to pick or have their own appointments.
They will get their own appointment when the time comes. If they come in...
Mr. Chairman, with that, I would like to make a motion that we defer the appointments, all appointments from here on out until January 1st.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we defer appointments until January 2nd. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Nay. Mr. Thomas, how do you vote?
Nay.
Mr. Black?
Aye.
Mr. Underwood?
Nay.
Mr. Akers?
Nay.
Mr. Seeley?
Aye.
And I vote nay as well. Okay, moving along, that takes, are you through, sir? Did you have any more?
I'm done.
Thank you. Mr. Underwood?
Mr. Chairman, only two comments. Again, I want to also congratulate John Copeland on his election. Secondly, thank the voters as well, the Reedy Church District, for turning out in large numbers, and hopefully we can continue to satisfy those voters and continue to do the work that they feel helps to meet the needs of Reedy Church community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Akers?
Mr. Chairman, please, thank you. I would like to say to the voters of the Madison District, I appreciate the ones that came out and voted on Tuesday. I'd also like to say thank you for allowing me the privilege and the honor of serving them for 28 years. It has been a good 28 years. I think the county has been successful during those 28 years. There have been some disagreements, no question, but I will say that past boards, we were able to resolve our differences in a amenable way, and we didn't take it personally. So I appreciate the opportunity, and again, I'd like to thank the voters of the Madison District for what they've done for me over the past. We weren't successful this year, but hey, life moves on, and that's the democratic way, and that's what I enjoy living in this great United States about, is the fact that you have a choice, and you make that choice, and we move on from it. And I'm just thankful to have been part of that choice, and on the affirmative side for 7 elections. And so I'm very thankful for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. Mr. Seeley?
Mr. Chairman, I would first like to thank the VFW for the wonderful Veterans Day ceremony they did on the courthouse lawn. It's a tradition. It wasn't even advertised. We had around 60 people come. I think that speaks volumes for the folks that want to pay a respect to all of those that have served. I'd also like to thank Bowling Green Elementary for hosting the veterans. They did lunch that day, and the JROTC Color Guard came. Colonel Meyer and a number of relatives and other soldiers were at Bowling Green Elementary. I think the children at the elementary school really enjoyed seeing them. For those that haven't been, they all got out napkins and wanted everybody's autograph that was there in uniform. They were running table to table. It was quite something to see. Always grateful to see that. And then yesterday afternoon, after the 38th parallel, I was able to go over and watch one of the technology clubs The middle school has 3 or 5 3D printers. They've just gotten them, and they're starting to bring them up online. And the projects they're talking about doing for the school system are absolutely phenomenal. I would encourage anybody that has an opportunity to see some of that to take a look. They are really doing an outstanding job at the middle school. It was beyond anybody's wildest dream. Lastly, I would just like to say that I'm really disappointed in the board not allowing new board members to appoint planning commission members. With the way the election results went, I think the new members deserve to have the ability to pick somebody to work with them on the planning commission. Being new, it's really important to have good communication with a planning commission member that you have chosen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, Mr. Seeley. I would just like to, first of all, say thank you to the citizens of the Port Royal District and Caroline County. I've had the privilege of serving for 20 years, and I have enjoyed it. It's been good, it's been trying, and it's been a few other words at different times, but all in all, the good far outweighs the bad. And so I really enjoyed doing what I did, and I feel as though with the help of this board, we've made some good accomplishments. And I just would like to again thank the board for all their support, as well as the citizens. And while I'm on that, Ms. Nancy Long is here. She is the new supervisor. January 1, Ms. Long, congratulations. And certainly, as I have said to you in the past, if I can be of service to you in your transition, you have only to ask. One good thing about America is that we as people decide who we want our leaders to be. And when the people speak, we listen. And we go ahead and we do what's necessary to make this county the great county that it is. That's why this country is so great, and I'm sure it will continue to be. And just as a sidebar, I am making the appointment for the Planning Commission, but I have talked that appointment over with Mrs. Long, and we both agree that that person is a good person for that position. Just for your information. Thank you. That takes us to presentations and reports. Discussion of upcoming General Assembly honorary, I'm sorry, Mr. O'Rourke is not here, so Mr. Whiteman. Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen. John would have been here, but his kids had a school event, so he gave me the notes to go over. Plus, we've been doing inspections, so we've had boots on the ground. Over at the high school, all the footings for the addition to the front of the school have been poured. We are installing the groundworks and the rain leaders, and the foundation work should commence shortly. The foundation and slab materials have been delivered, and some electrical work has started inside the school. Southwood has been a good company so far. The superintendent, Ernie, is in constant communication with us, and it appears it's going to be a good project. We've got one issue. The roof system was part of the value engineering to get to the price. They hired an engineering firm to come in and do some thermal imaging of the roof, because we all know the roof is leaked, and the report said 20% of the roof insulation on the entire footprint of the roof would have to be replaced. So they commenced, they rented a machine, and I'm not for sure if you all know that the roof is gravel, the old gravel type roof. Had to rent a machine to come in and peel the gravel off, and they were going to get to that portion of the roof insulation that needed to be replaced. As they started opening up the roof, the entire thing is soaked. So they had to patch that, take a step back and decide which direction we're going to go, and we have to do the entire roof, all the insulation. So right now they're looking at the roofer as far as the price is going to be. We've lost the value engineering savings that they identified. We have the machine rental for the gravel, which is quite pricey. We've got the cost of all the added insulation and the labor to tear off the entire roof. We don't have a price yet. They're still working it and taking bids, but there is some loss there on the value engineering and maybe some more dollars depending on the bids we get back. But I'll keep Mr. Cully informed on that. Over at Madison Elementary, of course, we have Haley Builders. We have the superintendent is Mark Pitts. He's a gentleman that did county administration. Mark is fantastic, constant communication. Him and John have a great working relationship. The footings and the foundation are being installed on the front of the school. The construction is ongoing for the entrance and the bus loop. The retention pond is close to completion for the stormwater. And the underground stormwater structure has been delivered and they're getting ready to install. All in all, I think it's going along right good according to schedule. Of course, we've had the inclement weather with rain, but at least the cold temperatures, we can get the footers in the ground, hopefully get the masonry up, and we won't have to go to cold weather procedures and then get it under roof.
Okay, board members have questions for Mr. Whiteman? Oh, okay.
Mr. Whiteman, sounds like there's going to be some additional costs, but you have no idea of what the additional cost is going to be in terms of the baseline, in terms of putting the roof on, as well as any changes?
No, sir, not yet. There was a meeting today. The contractor, the project manager, said he didn't have a final price yet, still working with the roofers. I suspect in a week at the, maybe 10 days, we'll know those associated costs. I think it's important, though, and Mr. Elmore, I think you have a good point. The bid was over, and in order to get to the bid price, we had to do some value engineering, and now we've lost that part of value engineering on the roof.
I'm just concerned how much are we losing as a result of that, and then I'm just surprised that the roofer didn't say this is going to cost X number of dollars to do what needs to be done in order to do the prep work so the roof can be replaced. Seems like they were giving you some indication of cost, or someone an indication of cost and what those measures would lead to.
Yes, sir. They're still, because this roofer has both projects, so a roofer that brings his equipment and men down and he's doing two projects, they're trying to work with him. And like I said, hopefully in a week, 10 days, we'll have that cost.
Okay, but he bid the project, both of them, so he should have, I mean, that's his issue, not mine. My issue is the cost.
Yes, sir.
Overrun.
Yes, sir.
But I appreciate it. Thanks, Ken.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Other board members have questions? Mr. Thomas?
One, because the reality is there is going to be an increased cost due to the roof.
That's correct, sir.
And the ballpark is probably $1 million,
No.
500,000?
No.
Ballpark, I'm not going to hold you to it. 300,000?
200,000. Ballpark for right now.
Ballpark,
Yes, sir.
okay, thank you.
Other board members? Thank you, Mr. Whiteman.
Yes, sir.
We appreciate your report. That takes us to Capital Projects, Plan of Finance, Mr. Rogers and the Davenport Company. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Tell us the good news.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Let me see if I can pull this up. I didn't, didn't I? Okay. All right, evidently we don't have it electronically. You all have a copy of the presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Pam, is it on here? Do you know if it's on?
Oh, you don't have a copy down there?
I don't.
You want mine?
There we go. There we go. All right.
Okay.
All right. Perfect. Mr. Chairman, so tonight what we're going to do, we're going to actually, really a three-part presentation. And part one is plan of finance for the short-term needs, and that's including, some of you might remember in 2005 we issued some bonds for a fire truck that's already been, that portion has already been amortized. But it was a 20-year amortization. In the final 10 years, which will continue paying off one of the schools, basically it was we had a 10-year fixed rate, and at 10 years that rate was going to be reset. And so we're going to add to that as a part of it some new money for another fire truck and the sheriff's cars. So we'll talk about that. Second, we're going to talk about fiscal policy guidelines. And then third, we're going to talk about future needs out in 2016, including refinancing the Series 2011 lease revenue bond notes, as well as some transportation needs that we've been discussing with staff. So on the short-term side, you know, one good thing is interest rates are in our favor. Interest rates have stayed low over the last several years. We've seen some spikes there on the left-hand side. You can see the 20-year AAA MMD, which is basically a AAA rated GO, what an interest rate would look like. On the right side, you can see what it's done over the past year. We have seen a little bit of an increase from the early part of the year, but all in all, you can see it's right there around 3%, and that's a 20-year rate. So it's been a good time to borrow money if you've been in the market, and this will be a good time to basically lock in the rate, hopefully for the next 15 to 17 years. Because on this next page, you can see the 2005 debt service at our current rate, the rate that was good for the first 10 years of 3.9%. We still have the amortization that goes out to 2033, which is basically 17 years. What we want to do is also look at financing a new fire truck, and that won't be for the full 17 years because we don't expect that, or the sheriff's cars to last that long. But we would basically amortize that over a shorter period. I think the sheriff's cars, Fran, help me out, we're going to do 3 years, 4 years? 4 years for the sheriff's cars, and then the fire truck, we're going to do 10? Yeah, 10 years on the fire truck. So what we're looking for is to basically send out, with your approval tonight, we'd send out an RFP tomorrow, get it back in time before the next board meeting in December, and with your approval there at the December meeting, we'll come back with a recommendation to lock in that rate and close before the holidays. We have to do it by January 15th of 2016 because that's when the rate basically would be reset. Now, if we did nothing, the rate would be reset without the new money at basically a formula that's in the ballpark of this current rate, but it's only be for 5 years, not basically what we're hoping for is 15 years or longer. One of the options that we're going to do on the RFP is for the full 17 years. There are some banks out there that are not giving us a fixed rate for longer than 10 years or longer than 15 years. So we're also going to show them an option where it's 15 years left on this amortization. In other words, we're going to shorten the amortization by 2 years. It increases the debt service on our given rate by about $30,000 a year, so it's not a huge number. Something I think we can, you'll see in a moment, will work fine with our debt service schedule. Yes, sir.
I just want to remind the board of two things. We were planning on lease financing or financing the fire truck that was approved in the budget for this year, along with the patrol cars. So when this came up, that we had to do this interest rate, we said that's why we added to this, because we think we'll get a better rate than doing those sort of standalone through lease financing like we've done in the past. But that's how we plan to pay for those things that were approved in the budget, were with a lease purchase of both those items.
So essentially, our thoughts are to go through and send this RFP out for a direct bank loan. Obviously, this will be issued through the EDA. We need to go through them. We'd send this proposal out. We send that to over 25 local regional banks. We expect we'd probably get in 3 to 5 is sort of the norm in terms of the responses we might get back. So basically, we would amortize the the 4.9 million and change that are still outstanding on the 2005 bond, either over 15 or 17 years. 450,000 for the fire truck, again at 10 years, and then 350,000 for 10 sheriff's cars, basically over a 4-year amortization. One just a little side note, it's more of a structuring issue. We have a principal amount that's going to come due on January 15th. Because it's going to be tight in terms of the timing of it and repaying it, one of our thoughts is to use what you've got in the budget right now to downsize the issue, and then I'll have our first principal paid basically in January of next year, 2017, if you will. Based on our current market conditions, we think that we can get a rate in that 3.25 to 3.70 range, or basically better than where we were for the first 10 years, that 3.90 rate, based on the current market. Hopefully we'll get even better than that. Next page just kind of gives you a sense of what the differential is. Assuming we got a rate of 3.25, we actually end up saving over that 3.90 rate, if you will, and I'll put quotes around that savings because it's not true savings, but it will help our debt service, because what you're going to see a little bit later in the presentation is when we've shown you debt service schedules of your existing debt, we've always assumed a 3.90 rate for the rest of this 2000 bond issue. So to the extent we get a lower rate, we'll actually have some savings in the out years in our debt service schedules going forward. So just to give you a sense of what the fire truck and the sheriff car amortization looked like, you can see those here on this schedule. And then we also ran it at a 3.70 rate just to kind of show you the high end of that. You can see there's still a little bit of savings, but not near as much as if we can get on the lower end of it. And then again, here's our fire truck and sheriff cars again at the higher end, the 3.70 rate. So from a schedule standpoint, if it's okay with the board, get your nod tonight. Basically, we'll send that RFP out tomorrow. We will get the responses back on December 2nd, come back to you at your December 8th board meeting, and then we'll need to set up a meeting with the EDA after that and work to get closed before the holidays. So that's part one. I'm going to pause for a moment, Mr. Chairman, to see if anybody has any comments or questions on that part.
Would the board like to ask questions now, or just go ahead with the presentation? Okay, so we'll just wait until the end.
Okay, it sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, so the second part of the presentation, I want to talk about ratings. One of the things as we start looking out, the county has done a phenomenal job of being able to get itself back on firm footing with their fund balance. We'll show you that in just a moment. And so we've talked about over the years why we don't have a credit rating. One of the reasons is we've not had large enough issues to go out and bond for those. But knowing that there's some transportation needs down the road, it's just something to put in the back of our minds to maybe get ourselves in that position. Thought it might be a good time just to talk about what are the key drivers to a credit rating. And there's four basic areas over the next couple of pages we'll talk about. First one is the economic base, basically talking about the local, regional, as well as national factors. But obviously more important is what's going on here in the county. They look at demographic characteristics, including what's happening with population, employment, wealth levels. The tax base, how big is it? What's the structure of it? How diverse is it? What type of industry do you have? What's the mix? Composition of the employment base. And then what do the patterns look like? And obviously the county's had some nice economic wins here recently, have some things going on in the county coming up, so there's a lot of positives there. Second area is financial performance and flexibility. You look at the revenue expenditure structure and the patterns, look at basically how the historical revenue and expenditures have come in versus some of the budget numbers that you've put out there, and I know those have done well over the last several years. And then we look at fund balance position, and that has been a source of strength here recently. We've been able to build that back up. And then looking at budgeting and long-term financial planning, and it's part of what we're going to talk about here in just a moment. And then finally, pension funding and insurance risk, and the county, of course, participates in the VRS and is in good shape on that. Then number 3 and 4 is really debt factors and management factors. Debt factors basically are what types of securities are out there and what's the debt structure look like, the balance between how fast we're paying the debt off and not investing in its capital facilities. And the board's done a good job of balancing that, taking care of some of the needs, such as the high school project was just discussed, and keeping up its existing facilities, as well as investing in some of the new facilities. And then what we do is we measure our debt burden against the total tax base, total outstanding debt divided by the tax base of the county, and then we look at debt service as a percentage of budget. We're going to talk about those here in just a moment. And then finally, management factors, and that includes not only your administrative staff, but also yourself, the board, setting fiscal policies, putting those in place, looking at long-term financial planning, and having the capacity to provide for services that the county demands. Just in the last couple of years, both S&P and Moody's have updated their methodology. Thought you might find it interesting to see the types of things that they're going to look at. In September of 2013, S&P revised its methodology to basically look at several factors, and they basically assign a factor of 1 to 5 in each area. Economy being the biggest at 30%, management 20%, institutional framework, which basically means for Virginia, Virginia has a very good institutional framework and actually gets the best score, or a 1, primarily because in terms of being able to create revenues, we have a lot of flexibility. The board can set tax rates without having to go out and do a referendum. Some states you actually have to have a referendum to do so. And so as a result, that's one of the key things that makes it the top score there. Financial measures include budgetary flexibility, budgetary performance, and liquidity. And what that means is the budgetary flexibility is having the ability to move dollars around in the budget in a tight year. Having fund balance to be able to pick up if things don't come to fruition in the budget. Liquidity, fund balance again, making sure that you have enough liquidity on hand to take care of any short-term needs should they crop up. And then budgetary performance, how well did your revenues and expenditures do versus your expected budget? And then finally, debt and contingent liabilities, and that's again the debt side and the pension side, and that's 10% of the score. Moody's did a similar update just several months later, January of 2014. Very similar factors, the economy and tax base at 30%, finances at 30%, management at 20%, and then debt and pensions at 20%. And you can see some of the rating sub-factors there on the right side. Again, very similar to what I just discussed with S&P, some of the debt factors, budget factors, fund balance, things like that. So one of the things to think about is putting into place some fund balance policies, debt policies. Some of the examples here on this page, on page 16, include payout ratio. How quickly are we paying off our debts? They like to see a fairly rapid payout ratio for AA rated or better rated entities at 60%. Essentially what that means is within 10 years, 60% of the debt is paid off. Basically what that means is not pushing debt off and having amortizations too long. In terms of total outstanding debt as a percent of the assessed value of the county, one of the levels that we like to look at is not to exceed 4%. That's a policy that, these policies are very similar, for instance, to your neighbor to the north in Spotsylvania they use. Total debt service, including leases, that's a percentage of basically the total budget, including the schools, would not exceed 12%. It's another way to look at kind of keeping your credit card in check and making sure that you're not spending too much of your annual budget, annual dollars, going out for debt service. And on the fund balance side, policy of basically keeping that fund balance as a percentage of, again, overall revenues, including schools, no less than 10% with a target of 12%. And that's something that you guys have worked toward and have now achieved, you'll see in just a moment. And then the last one is something that you might think about that may not be something that's achievable immediately, but something you might strive for, and that is making sure that you're taking some of that annual budget and putting it toward pay-go projects. For instance, the needs for school buses, the needs for sheriff's cars are going to be annually. Rather than going out and borrowing for it like we're proposing to do now, is trying to work toward putting that in the annual budget going forward. This is what the unassigned fund balance looks like. As I said, over the last several years, you've been able to grow that to a point where it's now above the 10 to 12% range that we've talked about, or we're suggesting as a possible policy. As you know, that fund balance is used for several things. And so it basically keeps the operations of the government moving forward in terms of you've got debt service, you've got salaries to pay, but your revenues generally only come in once or twice a year. And so you've got to have enough funds on hand. We measure it at June 30th because that's when your audit is finalized, the date of the final year of your budget. But that is a guide that we use throughout the year, and 10 to 12% at that June 30 time period basically allows your bills to be paid without having to go out and borrow any dollars.
Can I interrupt one?
Yes, sir.
One point on that page, 11 and 12 and previous all had that due to from the utility fund. So if you looked at the audit, the fund balance on paper looked better than it actually was in cash. 13 and 14, that fund balance in the audit is actual money in the bank, not a due to owed from the utility fund that, if you remember, we wiped out because we were never going to get that paid. So really 13 and 14 is cash, 12, 11, and 10, and 9, those were including that $4 million number. So if you really look back at 8 and 9 and 10, we were pretty close to no fund balances while you had the annual borrowing every year.
That's a good point. Doing accrual accounting, it's hard just to come up with a cash number for governments. So we use this general fund unassigned fund balance, and if you don't dig into the details, you might miss something like that. So it's a very good point. Thank you, Tori. We thought it might be good for you to see a comparison of some of your neighbors and how you stand versus those when you look at fund balance. And on the left side, we've got the actual dollars, if you will. The right side is probably a better way to compare apples and oranges, and that is on a percentage of revenues. Right. And you can see that well up there in the 20% range, there's only a handful of folks who have also saved in that same range. You can see that folks like Stafford and Spotsylvania are in and around that 10%. Knowing, working with Spotsylvania, I know they actually use some of their fund balance each year for some of their pay-go projects and spend the dollars back down to around the 10 to 12% range.
We got more money than that.
I started talking about why it's important to keep that fund balance for those who, for those of us who get paid every couple of weeks, it's easy. That we get those funds in, we pay our bills, and we get paid again a couple of weeks later. For the government, you're collecting taxes twice a year. You get some other revenues here and there from the state, but you've got to be able to provide for those interim periods because you still have salaries to pay and debt service amounts that come due. So number one, it's really the month-to-month cash flow. And a study we did many years back showed that in Virginia, for those governments who collect 2 times a year, at a minimum 8% is needed generally in order to be able to make those slow periods, which are basically at the end of April and the end of October, just before the bills are mailed out. Because as soon as the bills are mailed out, folks begin sending their checks back in, and the coffers begin to refill in terms of the cash that you have on hand. But there's also things such as what happens if a tornado comes through. James City County is a good example. They had straight line winds several years ago. They had a lot of damage to clean up, and once it was all said and done, it took about 3 years for FEMA to finally reimburse them for all of the funds that they had spent. And so you need to have cash on hand to be able to provide in certain situations. And then, of course, what happens if there's a unforeseen expenditure or revenue shortfalls? You want to be able to have some funds on hand to be able to pick those up as well. And of course, one of the things that's most important is the banks or rating agencies are going to look at your flexibility there, and that can also determine how good of an interest rate you might get, is how well your balance sheet looks. The last thing is really, at the end of the day, you do at least earn interest on it. And while right now we're not earning even 1% on that money, if interest rates do get back up to some interest rates we've seen in the past with the Fed talking about raising rates again here shortly, you do actually get some interest back that helps to go and can be used in the budget. Here's an example of what your debt as a percentage of assessed value looks like. On the left-hand side is historically where it's been, with the lighter green being basically what we see as existing debt going forward. We added the issue there in 2015, so it jumped up. The policy that we talked about is maybe 3, maybe 4%. Here we've used 3%. You can see that you've still got some room even if we use the lower 3% value. Debt service as a percentage of revenues, again, this is sort of compared to your checkbook. 12% is a guideline that we've used for a lot of AA-rated counties throughout the state. Folks like Spotsylvania, Montgomery County down in Blacksburg uses that as their high point. When you get above 15%, it starts getting in sort of the yellow flag area for the credit rating agencies, if you will. So we try to stay a little bit lower than that. You can see we're just above that right now, but once some of the debt starts being paid down over the next several years, and a lot of those are very front-loaded, again, for some of the school buses and things like that we've done over the last several years, that will come down, and you can see it coming down pretty substantially there after a couple of years. And then finally, the payout ratio, and again, that is a guide of basically how much of your principal is paid off in the next 10 years. And one of the measures that we use in a number of our places is looking at the end of the 5-year CIP. Let's try to be at or above that 60% payout ratio at the end of the adopted 5-year CIP. So in this case right now, we're at 54%, so we're a little bit on the lower side. But 5 years from now, if we don't add any more debt, we'll be at 77%. So one of the things that we look at is what happens when we add some of this new debt that we may be talking about down the road. So I want to just kind of give you a feel for some of the things we look at, let you think about it. We can always come back at a later date and give you some other looks. We can talk further about it. But I just wanted to make sure we put that on your radar for the future, because we're going to be talking about the capital needs in the future in 2016, and that's including paying off or I should say, setting up the bond anticipation notes, and begin amortizing that debt. In the existing debt graphs you just saw, we already have that built in. All the existing debt structures that you've seen from us in the past have included an assumed payoff of that, amortizing that debt in the future. And we understand that there are some possible transportation needs out there of about $8.4 million. And so what we've done is added that in as well. I'm sorry, that's the payoff of the, I'm getting mixed up, sorry. That's the payoff of the 2011. The $6 million is the transportation projects in the future. So the $8.4 million has already been factored into the debt service. The $6 million we're going to see in just a moment. So on this page, the $90.9 million of debt that's outstanding on the left side, that includes the $8.4 million of the 2011. That also includes the amortization of the 2005 bonds that we're talking about, resetting that rate here in December.
What's in the 8.4 million?
That's the YMCA and one of the school projects.
Bowling Green.
Bowling Green that we did in 2011.
Okay.
So those are all, so both the 2005 bonds that we're going to rate reset, the 2011 bonds are both incorporated in this $90.9 million. And for the 2011 bonds, we've assumed that we're going to take those out in 2016 and amortize them out at 4%. The next set of columns there where it says the estimated direct bank loan, new money debt, that's basically the fire trucks and the police cars.